Good evening, guests and friends. On behalf of their honors, it is my pleasure to welcome you to Evenings at Government House for a night with Hope Swinimer, founder and director of Hope for Wildlife. My name is Melissa Gertzen, and I'm the communications advisor to the Lieutenant Governor. Tonight, I will serve as your master of ceremonies. In the spirit of meaningful reconciliation, we are proud to acknowledge your presence on the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people in what is today Nova Scotia. Through the Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1725 and subsequent treaties, the connection between the Mi'kmaq people and the Crown was formalized and remains a foundational aspect of modern Canada. This kinship and connection endures because of the special relationship that exists between the Queen of Canada and the Mi'kmaq people. The treaties also remain important to the relationships that exist between the Mi'kmaq and all Canadians. It is best exemplified by the phrase, "We are all treaty people." In a moment, I will ask you to rise as their honors enter the ballroom. At this time, I would ask that you please take a moment to turn off your cell phones or put them on vibrate mode. Also, I would ask that you do not stand up to take photographs during the presentation. Our official government photographer is on site, and we will be posting photos tomorrow morning on our Facebook and Flickr pages. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and join me in welcoming their honors, the Honorable Arthur J. LeBlanc, Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia, and Mrs. Patsy LeBlanc.
Well, please have a seat. Well, good evening to all. As the Queen's representative in Nova Scotia, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the 6th evening at Government House session of this series. Et à titre de représentant de la Reine en Nouvelle-Écosse, nous sommes très heureux de vous accueillir ici à la résidence du gouverneur. Patsy and I are thrilled to welcome guests to Government House. We have been waiting for many months to gather in person and celebrate the culture and heritage of our province. Tonight, I am pleased to welcome Hope Swinimer, founder and director of Hope for Wildlife. For the past 25 years, Dr. Swinimer has made a profound impact on wildlife rescue and rehabilitation efforts in Nova Scotia, and indeed across Canada. Her work connects people to wildlife in positive ways and supports the conservation of delicate ecosystems in the province. When I consider Dr. Swinimer's distinguished and esteemed career, I am inspired by what can be accomplished by one single individual who pursues her passions and is committed to making positive change. Since opening Hope for Wildlife in 1997, Dr. Swinimer and her team have rescued and released over 50,000 wild animals, representing 250 species that are native to Nova Scotia. In addition to her rehabilitation work, Dr. Swinimer is dedicated to educating and providing opportunities for others by offering internships, volunteer, and employment opportunities to Nova Scotians. And Dr. Swinimer has served as a mentor to many and trained countless people to care for our wildlife. through her work, Nova Scotians develop the skills to build sustainable initiatives that support the future health of our wildlife and environment. Well, it is a privilege to know that there's a professional of Dr. Swinimer's caliber here in Nova Scotia. I extend my deepest gratitude and sincere appreciation for her many contributions to our province and its people. Patsy and I are indeed looking very much forward to this evening's presentation. And we thank all of you, including those watching us on video, for your interest in Evenings at Government House. Je termine en disant que Patsy et moi avons très hâte d'entendre l'exposé de ce soir. Merci. Merci d'être ici. Thank you. Merci. Walaliak.
Thank you, Your Honor. It is now my pleasure to introduce Hope Swinimer. Dr. Swinimer has had a remarkable career. While working as a manager at Dartmouth Veterinary Hospital, she rehabilitated a number of injured animals at her home. During this time, she worked with the Department of Natural Resources to develop a rehabilitation license, the first of its kind in the province. With the license in hand, Dr. Swinimer established the first privately owned wildlife rehabilitation center in Nova Scotia. Today, Hope for Wildlife responds to tens of thousands of emergency calls, offers educational opportunities to the public, and collects data that supports the health of local wildlife. Dr. Swinimer's vision for Hope for Wildlife has resonated with thousands of individuals in Nova Scotia and beyond. Her work connects people to wildlife in positive ways and provides us with a deep appreciation of the natural world. Please join me in welcoming Hope Swinimer.
Good evening, everybody. It's so wonderful to be here. I want to thank your honors for the kind invitation. I always welcome opportunities to tell people about what Hope for Wildlife does and why we do it. So thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Melissa and I had a great conversation a few weeks ago on what kind of topics we might talk about tonight. So we decided that it might be really nice to share with you some of the earlier years, how we came to be, some of the trials and tribulations and the joys and the successes of running the Hope for Wildlife Society. So it's a new presentation I've never given before, so I really hope you enjoy it. I always like to start with our mission. I know it's a little bit old-fashioned, but I created it at the very beginning of Hope for Wildlife. And I have to say, it's not one of those mission statements that I just stuck away in a drawer somewhere. I refer to it all the time whenever I'm in crisis or whenever I have a hard decision to make. I go back to that mission statement, and it really helps me make the decisions that are needed to be made. So our mission is connecting people to wildlife in a positive way through knowledge and understanding. We believe that education through rehabilitation is the key to a sustainable future. And I always say this picture is my mission statement. And I'd really welcome you to look at the look on that little girl's face, and it kind of sums up what I just said. I think it was about 7 years ago now, I received a call from a young lady in the Truro area. And she wanted me to do a talk at her school with her naturalist group. So I was pretty excited. I took all the information, wrote it down, and made arrangements to go forward with the tour and talk. And just before I hung up, she said, you know, I've met you before. And I said, oh, really? Where have we met? And she said, I was a little girl and I came to your rehab center, and you took 2 or 3 minutes with me and showed me this beautiful little baby skunk. And so after all those years, and I just think it's a testament probably for everybody in this room. We've all met people, we've spent moments with those people, and we just don't realize what an impact we might be making in their lives. She said it really changed her life. It made her think of nature in a different way. So Hope for Wildlife is located in Seaforth, Nova Scotia, which is only about 45 minutes from here, and it's on the eastern shore. It's a beautiful location, a beautiful lake out in front. This is an old photograph just before I purchased. We call it the farm, and you'll hear me refer to it that way throughout the evening. And we needed a place that we had lots of room. This is the way Hope for Wildlife looked when I purchased it. And, you know, it served our needs, but it certainly needed a lot of upgrades. And this is the facility today. So it's really come a long way. We're happy. We hope we can stay there forever. It fills our needs. And it's a beautiful, breathtakingly beautiful property. Some of those buildings there you see, I'll be explaining to you tonight what it is we use them for and what purpose they serve. I really want to talk to you about a couple of mentors in my life, 2 very strong women. And I think it's important, and I'm sure we've all picked mentors, and as time changes, we might change our mentor. But to me, they had a powerful impact. This picture here is of my grandmother. She lived to be 101 years old, and right to her dying day, she had a sparkle in her eye. She had a love for the natural world like you wouldn't believe. You'd always see her out in the garden or holding some animal. Didn't matter if it was domestic or what it was, and it's brought her great joy. And as time went on, I used to continue to visit her even when I moved away. And when I'd pull in her yard, back in the day, I didn't have as much help as what I have today. So I'd have to take the animals with me if I ever traveled to stop and feed them along the way. So I'd pull in the yard, and she wouldn't even say, "Hi, Hope, how you doing?" She would say, "What do you have in your car? What can you show me?" She was very much engaged in the work we do. If you look really closely in behind her, you'll actually see pictures of wildlife that I'd given her over time. But I used to love to chat with her, and I'd ask her questions about what it was like to grow up. And she told me many, many stories, but there's 2 that really stick in my mind. And one was when she was a very young girl. Her dad used to deliver the mail on horseback. And her job, every morning she'd get up and he would get his horse ready to go, and she'd fling open the barn doors and the horse would go tearing out, and that was her job for the day. And it's just an image that is stuck in my mind through all these years. And another story she used to tell me a lot of times was, you know, she didn't marry, you know, she considered herself quite old when she got married. She was all of 23, but back then that was considered quite old. And so she went to work, and she wanted to earn a living and earn her way. And she would go down to the shoreline and harvest the eelgrass and fill wagons full of this eelgrass, and she'd sell it to the community, and they would use it to bank their houses in the winter and to keep themselves warm. And she used to tell me that story, and she'd say, and you know, I used to be at a harvest just as much as the men, and I made just as much money as the men. So she was quite an entrepreneur, and she taught me that if you want to do something, you should do it, and nothing should stand in your way. The second lady I'd like to talk to you about, her name is Svietlana, and there's a picture of her there, and with her is my brother, Carl, and their son, George. When Carl graduated through university, he decided to go to East Africa to work and teach through a group called QSO. And Svieta had decided to do the same thing. She actually had taught for a few years, and then in Russia, and then she decided to go to East Africa. And they met, and they fell in love, and they got married, which At that time in history, it was under communist rule. It was very much against the laws of the Soviet Union to marry from outside of the Soviet Union. So it only took, I think, between 24 to 48 hours before the police were there and arrested both my brother and Svieta and took them back home to Russia. My brother was asked to leave very quickly. He got out within 48 hours of being there. But it took Svieta probably another 9 months before she was cleared to come home to Canada. And I have to tell you, she was quite a woman. She was a strong woman. She spoke her mind. I remember when we met, I was a very young teenager. So there couldn't be a better time in my life to meet such a strong woman. She would tell me how spoiled I was and what a beautiful house I had and have a roof over my head and clothes on my back and to have food on the table. And as a young lady, I was like, what does she mean? You know, we're not wealthy in any way, shape, or form, but we're like the rest of the community and we get by. But she really did open my eyes to how great it was to be a Nova Scotian, to grow up where I grew up, and to have the freedom and the beautiful life I had. And she made me very appreciative of that. She used to tell me stories when she was young. Her mom would send her to stand in line, you know, and sometimes she'd stand in that line up all day, and it was to get a piece of meat, perhaps, for supper. And sometimes she'd get there and all the meat was gone, and she'd end up only being able to get vegetables for food that day. So life was hard. So she made me aware through her wonderful storytelling. She'd tell me stories about the country and how beautiful it was and how close her family was and how close her students were with her. And she really brought home what is valuable in society today. And that stayed with me. The Dartmouth Veterinary Hospital was instrumental in getting Hope for Wildlife off the ground. As a youngster, I always had a deep-rooted love for the natural world, and I'd spend a great deal of my time outside, just learning and watching and reading. But when I went to work at the Dartmouth Veterinary Hospital, I think it was 1990 that I started there, I was the hospital manager, and it was the best job ever. I had the best bosses in the world, Dr. Rob, Dr. Cameron, and Dr. McKay, and they treated me very well, and I flourished there. But I did notice something in the first couple of years. I would see Department of Natural Resources going in and out all the time with these big boxes. And of course, I was very curious, so I'd go back and say, what's in the box? What are they bringing you? And every time it was always some kind of bird of prey. Could be an owl or a bald eagle, you name it, or, you know, osprey, whatever. And the Department of Natural Resources would bring them to Dartmouth Vet, and it was our doctor's job to fix these animals up and get them back into the wild. So, you know, it got me thinking, and because I'd studied and learned a lot about nature, I got to thinking, you know, what about all the other species that are out there? What about all the little songbirds that need help, or the mammals that get hit by cars and all those kind of things? So I had a little chat with my bosses, and they were willing for me when the phone rang and it was a client, and they said, hey, a bird just hit my window, what do I do? Or my cat just brought home a squirrel. What do I do? So they allowed me to start bringing these animals into Dartmouth Veterinary Hospital, and they would treat them whenever there was a spare moment. And they did this for me for many, many years. So sometimes when they complained about the huge volume of babies or wildlife coming in, I'd say, well, it's your fault. You agreed to do it. So, but they were a great company to work for sure. This picture here is of a lady named Jenny Costello. And you can see from her uniform, she was a Department of Natural Resources employee. This was taken in the 90s, I'd probably say around 1995. And I remember very early on, after I started the rehabilitation work, I'd gone to visit other rehabs. I'd traveled all over North America to learn, but I missed one important thing. I forgot to ask permission. So the knock came on my door from Jenny and Doug Archibald, and I can remember it just like it was yesterday. And they said, hey, you know, Hope, what you're doing is illegal. You don't have the right to do this. You need to stop doing what you're doing. So I thought, oh, shoot, I knew I was forgetting something, you know. And I invited them in, and we sat down at the kitchen table, And it took about 2 years, but at the end of all the talk and organization, we were given the first ever wildlife rehabilitation permit in Nova Scotia. And that was almost to the day. It was May 5th, so we are celebrating our 25th year. So it's really gone well. I have to say the relationship with Jenny was spectacular. I can remember being at the office sometime at Dartmouth Vet, and the phone would ring, and it would be Jenny say, "Hey, Hope, I'm down at Sullivan's Pond leg banding ducks. Would you like to come down and learn?" And you know, I wasn't really dressed for the occasion, but I just went immediately, and we had so much fun learning. So she taught me so much. One day she called me and she said, "Hope, you really need to come into the Waverley office. There's something really special here you're going to want to see." So again, I leave work and head on over, and she took me into a big garage, and there was a big drum there, and I knew the drum was used to catch live black bear. And I went over and looked, and sure enough, there was a huge black bear in there, and it was my first up-close encounter with a black bear, and it was really quite spectacular, and it left a very, very vivid memory. Jenny loved the black bears. She taught about them. She was their advocate. She cared deeply for them. And she actually went to the States and took training I think she went away for almost a month, and she went to a wildlife rehab in the States that rehabilitated black bear. And she learned about their behavior and what you needed to do it right. And her dream was to someday open a black bear rehab. She also invited me into the classroom with her, and I think that's where I got my love for teaching young people about nature, because she would take me with her, and these children were just so enthusiastic. They wanted to become good stewards of our natural world. So she opened up a lot of doors for me. She'd come out to the farm and she'd leg band and teach us how to leg band birds of prey and all that important stuff that you need to know to do. And she's retired now, and I miss that wonderful relationship that we had. What is wildlife rehabilitation? A lot of people don't really know what wildlife rehab is. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the actual rehabilitation work is all about in my mind. So I always start with education, and sometimes people are a little bit surprised. I have 3 main goals, and the first one is education. All 3 are equally important, but I feel education is the one that brings about the most change, and that's what we're after. So it's the education of our children and the general public regarding the importance of conservation of various wildlife species and the ecosystems that sustain them. We go into the schools right now. Now that COVID's over, yay, getting there anyway, and things have eased up a bit. So we go into the schools at least 2 days a week. If we had more manpower, we'd be into the schools every day of the week. And I think we take some education animals with us. They learn about their natural history. They learn about what's causing wildlife in Nova Scotia harm, and it gets them thinking about what they can do to prevent that and to be better stewards. Schools come out to Hope for Wildlife too, and we really enjoy those days when the buses pull in and we get to tour them about the facility. We have an education center and a learning center at the farm. Before COVID, we used to be open 5 days a week from 9 to 4, and we'd have people from all over the world would come and visit. Now we've reopened. We're starting small. We're opened on Saturdays now from 12 to 3, and as the demand grows, we'll continue to open and hopefully get back to normal. We do have events. One particular event that we have is the Big Open House, and we used to have it once a year before COVID, but this year we've set the date for September 10th from 12 till 4, and we're really looking forward to be able to host it again. It's the only day of the year that we open up the whole facility, so you're allowed to explore the nurseries and the hospitals and the raccoon nurseries and every bit of the farm. And obviously we can't do that too often for the well-being of the patients that we have, but we do want people to see just how amazing it is. Has anybody here been to the open house? Ah, good, yay. So you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes we get like 4,000 people that come out on that day, so it's a pretty busy time. So hope to see you all there, September 10th. We do use education animals at our facility, and we feel it's really important. Now, our goal is to get every animal back out to the wild, but every once in a while, for example, we had a fox come in that was hit by a car. and he was totally blind in the beginning, and we didn't know if his vision would ever improve. So now he has partial vision, but we did keep him, and he became an education animal. And it lets people learn about all kinds of things, from how to be a better driver on the roads at dawn and dusk, to watch your speeds, you know, what to do if a deer is out in front of you. So from this one education animal that we feel we give a really good quality of life to, they have to be comfortable around humans and not be stressed. We have to be able to give them a beautiful enclosure full of enrichment where they can have a good quality life. We have to be able to meet their medical needs and their nutritional needs. And if we feel we can do all that for a particular animal, we will take that animal into the school systems to learn too. So we don't have very many education animals, but we pick them wisely and we try and give them a beautiful life. We have a lot of programs for people. It's not just about the animals. And one of the ones we really enjoy is our co-op program, and that's for any students that are in high school. And by coming out to Hope for Wildlife, as soon as that student does 80 hours, they receive a high school credit. So we have 3 co-op students with us right now, and we always usually have 1 or 2 with us, but 3 is the most we've ever had. We've got a bit of a backlog. We also have interns. Yesterday was the day that all of our interns arrived at Hope for Wildlife, and we did a big training session where everybody came together and we got to meet them. And they will spend 16 weeks at Hope for Wildlife, and they come from all over the world. And, you know, some local, some from far, far away. Some of them stay at the facilities, some can drive in. And so they get to experience a lot about the work we do. The medical end of things, the husbandry and cleaning end of the things, you know, how to care for tiny little babies and how to deal with them so they don't become imprinted and too comfortable around people. So it is a really good learning experience. We also have volunteers. They usually come in once a week. We're always looking for more volunteers. And they're anywhere from the age of 18 right through, I think our oldest volunteer is probably around 84. And there's so many different things you can do. Just like any facility, it's just like a business, really. So you need people to help you in the office. You need people to help with the animals. You need to have people helping in the gardening. You need educators. You need people answering the phones. So the sky is the limit, and there's really something there for everybody. We kind of have a saying at Hope for Wildlife that it's not just about the healing of the animals, it's about the healing of the human spirit too. We do a lot of work on the phones, and the phones are critical for education because we can receive easily 30,000 calls a year from Nova Scotians, and they're just questions that they aren't sure what to do when they run into a wild animal, like a call on a seal pup on the beach. And we know the questions to ask, and we talk them through it. And a lot of people don't realize that seals are semi-aquatic, and they spend a third of their life on land. They love it. They like to bask in the sun and dry out. So we tell them, you know, what things to look for, and we determine whether that animal is in distress or not. So from 200 calls, there might be only 20 animals that need to be picked up and brought into our facility for rehabilitation. So we're very, very careful, and the phones are that instrument where people can call to ask questions. So the first thing was education. The second is the actual rehabilitation work itself. So rehabilitation and release into the wild of injured and orphaned animals. So a lot of people don't understand why it is we get so many animals. This year alone, 7,500 patients were dropped off or picked up at Hope for Wildlife. And these are just a few of the more common reasons we see patients. Window strikes, bird hit your window. I'm sure it's happened to most everybody here. Hit by cars, that's always in the top 3 reasons each and every year. Dogs and cats, our domestic animals, will sometimes bring home presents or small birds that are injured or cat bitten. They need to see a veterinarian. They need medical care. Poison, HRM is one city that still allows poison to be put out with a permit. We always know when this happens because our phone starts ringing like crazy and people are reporting these birds that are convulsing, and we call it stargazing, where their head is turned and they're looking up at the sky, or seizuring. And so on days that poison was put out, we're very, very busy. So it is good to understand how it all works, because if something eats that bird that died of poison, say a bird of prey comes down and eats that, they will die too from the poison. And don't forget, we're a complete ecosystem, and when it rains, the poison will go into our waterways and all those kind of things. We also see oiled birds, but maybe not for the reasons you're thinking. We occasionally get birds in that, maybe somebody illegally dumped bilge oil out at sea, and that seabird is covered with the oil and they can't thermoregulate anymore and they're washed up on shore and still alive. We do get the occasional bird for that reason, but mostly, believe it or not, it's because when restaurants put out their cooking oil when they're done with it, and they forget to put the covers on. So these, especially in the winter, these birds smell this, they're very hungry, and they fall in and they come out looking really pathetic, and they're really hard shape. So we take our time and clean them up in a proper way. We make sure they have their waterproofing before they get released back into the wild. And we get a ton of patients due to garbage wrapped around them, wires, crashing into things. If you look at that middle photo, you'll see that's an x-ray of a belly of a loon. And you have to look really, really close, but you'll see fishing lures inside. And #1 cause of death with the loons in Nova Scotia is lead poisoning. So we always recommend to hunters and fishermen to go home and check your gear and make sure all the lead stuff is thrown away and you buy appropriate gear that will not poison the environment. We have some really good programs in place that if you have lead shot still, you can trade that out at no charge for copper shot, which is much safer and much better for our natural world. We also see birds, especially after the high winds and storms that are blown in. A lot of human-animal conflicts. Probably the #1 is this time of year. People will discover wildlife on their property and they'll trap it and remove it. Never trap in the spring or early summer. That's when all the babies are there. And if we could stop that one action, we would probably have half the patients that we get now, because what happens when they take that raccoon away, the next day they hear the crying of the little youngsters and they're brought in to us. So always be aware what time of year if you're trying to relocate an animal. And, we get them in there starving and have diseases, and also those not needing rescues. So we're very careful to make sure somebody hasn't picked up a little fawn just because it was sitting all by itself. That's perfectly normal behavior. Sometimes people scoop up little fledglings that are on the ground and haven't learned to fly yet. So it's very important that as a facility, we make sure every animal that comes in needs to come in, and if it doesn't, we'll often send it back with the people once we explain that, no, you put it back and you'll see the mom fly right down and continue to take care of it, or you put that fawn back out and tonight at dusk, you'll probably see the mom come back to care for it. And we do get the orphans for most of the same reasons. The only 2 exceptions for the orphan babies is construction and landscaping. So everybody saves their construction work till the summer, and sadly a lot of roofs need to come off to be repaired, and of course in the eaves are many, many nests and many, many baby birds. So always do your walkabouts, be continuously checking your home for areas that wildlife might get in, and try and prevent that from happening before it happens. Also landscaping, we get a surprising number of calls that people dig out their lawnmower and do their first mow of the year, but you should do a really thorough walkabout of your property to make sure there's no ground nesting birds or no snowshoe hares in a little den, because they hunker down on the ground, they're hard to see. So if you don't walk about and check first, you just might mow right over those. So just a couple little tips to think about. Of course, the best part of the work we do is when we get to release an animal back into the wild. It's a beautiful barred owl. He'd been in for a broken wing. It took about 2.5 months, and he's all healed up and ready to fly free. And it's just beautiful photography there. I always like including this little photo. It was an old photo. It was the very first bobcat I ever had, and she was feisty from the day she arrived. I named her Roberta after my mother. And it doesn't take long for them to grow into big, beautiful bobcats. And we keep them very wild. It's always easier when you have more than one because they bond to each other and not a human. So we have to be really, really careful when we have just one of a species to avoid that from happening. So we talked about education, rehabilitation, and the final thing is the research work we do. And, you know, at the very beginning, we were so consumed with just the day-to-day operations that we weren't able to do as much research work, but it's really come a long way over the years. So research to develop the knowledge and understanding necessary for conservation and management of wildlife resources in the complex and continuously changing biological, social, and political environments. It's really a mouthful, I know, but it's so true when you think how much things change from day to day and year to year, and it's something we need to keep up with. One research project that I want to share with you is really interesting. It happened quite a while ago, and a group of students came out from Dalhousie that were trying to get their master's. And the research they were doing just fascinates me. They wanted to interview a whole bunch of children before they came to our facility, and then we would do what we usually do with young people, and then they wanted to interview them after they'd been through our facility, and then they wanted to follow up with these same children in 2 to 3 months. And so we were gung-ho, like we were excited. We thought for sure, well, they're going to find, of course, this is going to make a difference in the way they think and the way they care about their natural world. So it was late fall, and we received a call from the students, and they wanted to come in and present their findings to us, which was very kind of them. And we were a little nervous. What if all this work we've been doing and it wasn't making a difference? But sure enough, it was good news. And she said she found the children were more understanding, more caring. They also had less fear and more desire to nurture and be a better steward of their natural world, which was just amazing. But before they left, they said, we found one other thing, and they weren't expecting to find it. And they were quite excited about this finding. They discovered through their question and answer that they were more caring to each other, too. So in the days of bullying and all of these things, isn't it nice to see that nature can bring people together, too, in a more positive way? It's also interesting, I'm sure most of you in the room have heard of the avian flu. And it was in early January when Newfoundland got its first reported case. So we were immediately on high alert when we heard that news. And it wasn't long. It was still in January when we got a call about a goose. We went with our full protective gear. We knew what we were doing. We were ready for this. We had special protocols set up, special isolation units set up. So our rescuer went out and brought that goose to us. And I was one of the first to see the goose, and I could tell immediately it was something very, very serious, and something that I'd never seen before. I'd never seen a goose act this way. So we immediately put him in isolation, and sadly, he died within 12 hours of being admitted. And so we were on full alert. We immediately triple bagged the bird, scrubbed down the isolation area, and immediately sent it for testing to the University of Prince Edward Island. So they tested it quickly. Sure enough, it was the first case of avian flu ever reported in Nova Scotia. They sent it to Winnipeg, where they were able to do more research on the carcass and discovered it was the H5N1 virus. So I think it's really an important point that rehabilitators play an important role in our community and with our scientists and with our government. And we were the first to find this in our province. And also, when you go back and check, in Newfoundland, it was the exact same circumstance. It was a wildlife rehabilitator that found the first case there. So we're kind of the sentinels, and we can alert the public to things that may affect us and involve us. We've also, like the scientific stuff that many papers have been published, one on adenovirus that we thought only existed in skunks, but we were able to prove through seeing it in porcupines. So they were the veterinarians working on this project were able to get that paper published also. So a lot of really good data and research comes from the work that we do that we can share with everybody. We always have a wish list at Hope for Wildlife, and I'm sure a lot of people in the room know that we have been asking very nicely for 25 years now to have the right to rehabilitate black bears in Nova Scotia. Sadly, we're the only province in Canada that is still not allowed to rehabilitate them, but we tend to never give up, and we tend to keep on trying, and we will continue to keep on trying. We know we can do it. We know we can do it well. Many of our staff have worked in rehabs in British Columbia and all over that have dealt with black bears. We've got a lot of good expertise at our fingertips. There's many more things on our wish list. I won't cover them all, but one that pops to mind is we used to say a hit-by-car turtle was to arrive at our facility, and by the time it got to us, say it had passed away. We would immediately x-ray that turtle, be able to see if she had eggs. If she did, we would harvest those eggs and plant them in a special bin to try and incubate them. And then when they hatched, we'd be able to return them back to the wild. Now, every turtle in Nova Scotia is on the at-risk list. So being able to save even a few is critically important. And one year we saved over 250 baby turtles this way. And my gosh, it was fun when they started to hatch out. There are just turtles everywhere. And it's pretty exciting. And sadly, we're not allowed to do that anymore. So in some days I get a little discouraged because I'd like to see us moving forward in a positive way and doing the work that I know we're so good at. But with the public's help and everybody's help, I'm sure we can continue to progress in the areas that we'd like to. This slide, put the word perception there so that I'd remember. I'm sure all of you have heard the term, let nature take its course, or don't interfere with nature. And you've probably, some of you have even said that. But I think we need to put that into perspective, and I think sometimes we think of it in the wrong way. A lot of the work at Hope for Wildlife is dealing with what humans have caused. And I think we have a huge responsibility to take responsibility for our actions and fix what we have caused. No way are we interfering with nature in any way. We're being good stewards to our natural world. So I think sometimes when people say, oh, just leave it, let nature take its course, it's just an easy way out. It's a way, you hit that animal, you don't really want to be bothered by seeing if it's dead or alive, and just leave it, nature will take care of it. But I feel it's a bad message to send to people. It teaches them that all of nature is not important and part of a healthy ecosystem. And I think we need to start building more caring and not be fearful of nature, but understand it better. Know what things we need to be fearful of and know what things that we need to do to help it live on forever. I always put this little picture in there to remind me. One question I often get is, why do we rehab everything at Hope for Wildlife? Like people say, well, you should just really worry about the endangered species or the birds of prey or the big mammals. And I couldn't disagree more. I believe our whole mission and our whole vision is to teach people that we are a very complete biosphere. If you take a square foot of land and get out a little magnifying glass and try and see how much life is there, the piece of land with the most life is the healthiest piece of land. So for our very well-being, the more species we have, the more species we care about, the more species we maintain and nurture, the healthier we will be as individuals and the healthier our planet will be. And I think it's a really hard message for people to understand and get their head around, but I think once you do, you get it and you think, yes, it doesn't matter if a child brings me a little songbird that's incredibly plentiful. I'm for sure going to tell that child, thank you so much for caring. We will take good care of this animal and try and get it back to the wild. And that's the message that I want to send out to people. I did want to take a little bit of time, too, to talk about some of our achievements, some of the joys in what we've done over the years. One of the first things we did when we moved to our property in Seaforth was to build a huge flight cage. It's over 100 feet long, it's 30 feet high and over 30 feet wide. And it was built on a hill, so it was no easy feat to get it built, but it turned out beautifully. And every rehabilitation center needs a big flight cage. And this gives you an opportunity to test fly your birds to make sure they're fit and ready to go back to their wild world, and that they can build up some muscle when they spend time out in that flight cage. So they're critically important to the work that we do. It's a beautiful bald eagle there flying, a juvenile flying from end to end. We also have permission granted to us after asking lots and lots to rehabilitate fawns. And we had 42 in last year. We usually get them because they've been hit by cars or their mothers have been hit by cars. And it's a lovely process. They're wonderful animals to work with. And once they form a herd, there's not much chance of imprinting happening there. We have a beautiful almost 1 acre enclosure with fields and woods, and that's where they grow up. And they form a very tight-knit herd, and we release them in a herd because they do much better in the wild world if you release them in at least 7 per herd. We are very proud of our hospital. Dartmouth Vet served us well all those years, and then we were thrilled when we were able to put in our own hospital right on site. We're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The veterinarian that says National Wildlife Center on her shirt, that's Dr. Sherry Cox, and her dream, she's from the University of Guelph, and her dream is to have wildlife hospitals across Canada. Wildlife medicine is totally different than dog and cat medicine, and she knows all the ins and outs about it. She's been teaching it for years, and we were the first place that she did her satellite hospital at. So we're thrilled to have her, and she gives us an intern each and every year and to do the work that we do. And this is Dr. Hazel, and this is the 5th year, so we've had 5 different interns go through. She ran her own veterinary hospital in Ontario for 31 years, and when she decided to retire, she wanted to come to Nova Scotia to work at Hope for Wildlife and to be able to do wildlife medicine. So you can tell by her smile that she's pretty into it, and we love having her, and she brings so much expertise to us. But a lot of vets never get to learn, for example, how to fix a bird's wing. So this is a beautiful bird of prey, and you can see the humerus is broken there if you look closely. And you might think, ooh, that looks bad, but actually it's the kind of break that's really quite fixable. So we just simply put, the doctor wouldn't say that, a stainless steel rod in there, and it will heal up. Sometimes we have to put external fixatures on there also so that it won't twist, and give the bird about 6 to 8 weeks for healing, put them back in for surgery and remove that stainless steel and all the hardware, and give them a little bit of time in the flight cage, and they're free to go. This is an x-ray of a raccoon, and if you look closely around the neck, you'll see where it's indented there. That was one of the rings that, say you buy a jug of water, the little tiny rings that kind of fall off. That was embedded around the neck of that raccoon. So it had pretty well grown in there. It was causing the trachea to collapse, but we were able to surgically go in there, remove that, and get that animal healthy again and back out. This poor little guy, you can see, if you look closely at his head, he has a lot of road rash on his head, but that's not the worst of it. The road rash was over his whole body. It's amazing he lived through that hit by car. And even though he looks really calm there, it's just because he's not even really with us. He wasn't recognizing humans. You can see the drool coming out. We weren't sure we were going to be able to save this little fawn. But 3 weeks later, he was standing, still pretty skinny, but that's okay. He was well on the road to recovery, and we were able to release him. We put in ear tags in all of our deer, so don't shoot the deer with ear tags, okay? and we put microchips in them all too, just for our own sake, just so for tracking and that kind of thing. Look closely at the red and white area in this little porcupine. That was somebody had actually shot this porcupine with an arrow, and it had gone right through him, and the arrow was coming out the other side. I took this phone call, and I wasn't really sure what I'd find when I sent a volunteer to pick up, but sure enough, it was an arrow right through the porcupine. He was still alive. If you look at the letter R and look down, that's the end of the arrow, and just kind of trace it straight across. And that was, she was incredibly lucky that no vital organs were hit. But if you look at that belly, it looks pretty funny, doesn't it? So we were very surprised to discover that she was expecting. A raccoon's gestation is like over 209 days. It's really a long raccoon. A porcupine's gestation is a really long time. And so we were really worried. First off, would she survive the surgery for something that complicated? Would she abort the baby? If she did give birth to the baby, would she nurse it? And she passed all three. She healed up beautifully, she gave birth to that baby, and she nursed it. And you can see how big the baby is there, and we were able to release both mother and baby. Oh dear. I don't have a clock, so I'm okay. So we also have a solar panel farm at Hope for Wildlife. And we have two, actually, so we can have bragging rights to being off fossil fuel and living totally on clean energy. These beautiful marine units were built not that long ago, and they work so wonderful for the wildlife. When you put a wildlife out for rehabilitation, the more natural a world, the better. And here you have green grass and sunshine. They heal so much quicker. Their feathers are pristine. And when these pools are filled up, we put an overflow on them so that we have movement of water. And it's the movement of water that give these birds their waterproofing. So we have great success. We could do beavers, otters, seabirds, ducks, geese, all that kind of thing would go through these marine units. I do want to talk about how well educated our crew is and how well represented. It's unbelievable. We have 250 people just on our dispatch team alone, and then we have another 50 to 60 that work on the farm. And we have special speakers in. This was a weekend class we had just a few weeks ago from the International Wildlife Rehabilitation Council. They come in and give our people that work with us a lot, state-of-the-art learning and ability to grow and learn. This is our ICU. It's our newest building, and so when an animal comes in to Hope for Wildlife, it's triaged. If it's dying, it goes straight to the doctor. If it needs to be stabilized, it goes to ICU. And there they'll warm up the animal, they'll give it fluid therapy, and they'll give it pain meds. And then from there, the doctor will take a look, and the whole process continues. And it could spend up to 2 to 3 weeks in ICU until all the drugs were done, all the bandages were done, that kind of thing. It's a really good flow. We have Fenton Farmhouse. It's a 42 by 42 building, and it contains the heart and soul. A lot of hard work happens in this building. All the nurseries are here. So we're very blessed to have separate nurseries for different kinds of species, so there's no cross-contamination. It really helps with our biosecurity in that way. I have to tell you the story about Mitch Fenton. He called me about 10 years ago, and he asked a lot of questions. He'd seen our TV show, and he was really intrigued with what we were doing. So he asked us some really good questions. I talked on the phone with him for about a half hour, and just before I hung up with him, he said, "Look, I want to help. What can I give you?" And I always say something like, "Oh, we need gloves or face masks." But for some strange reason that day, I said, "We need a new digital x-ray machine." And he said, "Done, not a problem." I said, "No, wait a minute, there's $70,000. And he said, "Not a problem." I had the check the next week, and we had our digital x-ray installed within that month. And it's just amazing. He called me a year later. He said, "I want to do another project with you. Make it big," he said, "bigger than a digital x-ray." And anyway, he built us this beautiful building. Sadly, he did not get to see it completed. He passed away during the process. But on our celebration day and the ribbon cutting, his whole family, his friends, his siblings came out to celebrate that day, and it was really, really special. And it just shows you the amazing compassion and caring in human nature. We tend to dwell on the negatives sometime and let them bring us down, but there's so many good people out there. Is that saying that I'm done? Is it? Okay, good. I think I have 2 or 3 minutes left. Good, okay. We did set up a number of drop-offs, or we were finding it was really hard for these animals to travel 4.5 hours to get to their destination where they would be treated. So now our dream is to set up these drop-off centers in the valley and in the section stabilized so they can make the rest of the journey to us. And this is my last slide. So It's a beautiful peace pole. I don't know if any of you are familiar with them. It just says, may peace prevail on earth. In ours is special. It has unique in that we have paw prints mixed in with our words. And we let the volunteers pick the languages that they wanted to appear on the peace pole. And there's over 200. They became popular after World War II when the nuclear bomb was dropped. And it's just a place to go and think about peace on earth. And we have a beautiful one at our facility. Sometimes we get asked, why a peace pole at a wildlife rehabilitation center? And we always say, it's peace on earth, but it's peace with our natural world too. So I'd just like to thank everybody very much for coming tonight. And I've really enjoyed talking to you and sharing with you stories of hope for wildlife.
Thank you so much, Hope, for a wonderful evening. That was a lovely presentation. And it was so nice just to hear about some of the people who have inspired you, and also your vision for wildlife rehabilitation centers and how you were able to bring that to fruition in the province. His Honor mentioned earlier that it really is remarkable what one person is able to accomplish when they follow their passion, and I think your presentation is definitely proof of that. So thank you for everything that you've contributed to our province. On behalf of their honors, I would like to thank each of you for attending Evenings at Government House. Tonight, we're happy to host a dessert reception in the dining room, which is just across the hall, and we hope that you'll join us there. Before we go, I wanted to mention that next Tuesday evening, May the 10th, is our final in-person Evenings at Government House session of the season. That night, we'll be welcoming Emmanuel Solomon, who is an operatic tenor, and he'll be here for an evening of music. So again, we hope that you're able to join us that night as well. Registration details are available through Facebook and also on our website. At this time, I ask that you rise as their honors depart the ballroom.